Here I go. Yo, yo, Taiwanio, Oeha, Taiwan. It's a thanking song because we begin all of our ceremonies and gatherings with the Thanksgiving address in our ways. And because that takes quite a long time to say, I've brought it down to this song that I learned many years ago. So it begins Yo, which is in our language the greatest thanks we can offer. Yo refers to the feminine forces of Mother Earth. And so we're acknowledging and giving thanks for all of the gifts from our Mother Earth. Right from the ground, plant life, all the things that we have here to survive. Ho refers to the male forces of Father Sky. So now we're able to acknowledge and give thanks for all the things in the sky, from the birds to the sun, to the stars, the moon, everything. And Gaia is the world. And of course, all around the world, we want and within. And so we begin. I say, Yawago, and thank you for inviting me here. So Goli, that's our greetings for hello, everyone. Can you say Goli?
Say Goli.
That sounds so good to hear our language of this land, of this earth here. Segoli is Oneida. And I will begin with the introductions for myself and explain as I go. So I say Segoli Swakwe, that's greetings to all of you. Gajijawan, that's Gajijawan is my native name that my grandmother gave me many years ago now. Gajij is a flower. Gajijawan is a flower that speaks. Hatnawal, Hatnawal is the turtle, the clan, the family I'm born to. We have 3 clans in our, all of the 6 nations, the turtle, the bear, and the wolf, although there are 9 altogether. They're not all seen in all of the nations, but those are certainly some in all nations. Onyata Aga Onyata Aga is the nation I belong to. It's in English Oneida, one of the 5 nations of the Haudenosaunee, the Longhouse people of the Mohawk, the Oneida, the Onondaga, the Cayuga, and the Seneca. And those 5 became the 6 nations after they call it recent history in the 1700s. When the Tuscaroras welcomed in, and our nation of Oneida actually adopted that whole nation. And so it became the 6 nations. And so we have a confederacy that was created shortly after. And when we say shortly, in the course of 13,000 years that our people have been on this part of the island and all of southwestern Ontario, I will welcome you to the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee Longhouse people here. And the Tuscaroras, they say, just came in the door, they tell us, in 1700s. And so that made us the 6 nations. And so I'm very grateful and pleased to come here this evening and give you that welcome to this part of Turtle Island. We'll have someone else that's going to speak out of here now. And again, thank you, Yamongo.
That place is working. Looks like I turned around and on, sorry. Welcome everyone and thank you for coming to join in tonight's climate conversation. My name is Felicity Sutcliffe and I'm part of the Climate Momentum Group. I want to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous people that are the first inhabitants of this land on which we are gathered. They have been caring for our land for thousands of years, and together we're bound by the District 1's Wampum Belt Covenant of 1701. We're grateful to have the opportunity to live on this land. We make this acknowledgement to confirm our commitment and responsibility to improve relationships between our nations. We strive to improve our own understanding of local Indigenous people and their cultures. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and consider how we can each in our own way try to move forward in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So we have two special people with us today who have both been working very hard to educate the people in our community. I was fortunate to take the online course through Western University that's called Connecting for Climate Change Action. And this course inspired me to work on these climate conversations with Sheila and the team that has been putting them on. I know that I still have a lot to learn. I have also attended different community events led by Patsy, who continues to guide us all. So today we thank both Patsy and Katrina for all that they have been sharing with us. I also want to acknowledge the harm being done to the Indigenous people in Canada as we speak. Many have recently been removed from their land as a result of wildfires burning through their homes. We need to work harder together to mitigate climate change in order to protect our land. We also need to stand with the Indigenous leaders and allies who are pushing back against Doug Ford's Bill 5 and its dangerous cousin Mark Carney's Bill C5. These bills are trampling all over Indigenous rights in a blatant attempt to allow more mining and greenhouse gas extraction right now. And this is happening at a time where we all know better. I want to thank those of you who have helped us to raise awareness about these issues in our community and with our political leaders. Please join me in a moment of reflection about the harms currently being perpetrated against the Indigenous people of Canada. We can all reflect on how we can work better together. Okay, and now Sheila is going to introduce us.
I feel inadequate after those two wonderful moments of beauty and deep thought from Patsy and from Felicity. Thank you. We are indeed fortunate to have our speaker today. You may or may not know that we almost didn't have her. Her car broke down outside St. Mary's. I had a side trip to St. Mary's. Katrina Davidson comes to us from London tonight, but she also comes from a very wonderful place to my heart. She is Icelandic. So we are thrilled to have her here tonight. She is the chair of the Department of Geography and Environment at Western. She is a climate scientist and paleolimnologist, did I get it right? Who examines records preserved in lake sediments to reconstruct past climates and their impacts on aquatic ecosystems. She is also an accomplished and enthusiastic educator who has just completed a teaching fellowship, which provided time for her to co-create Connecting for Climate Change Action. That is the course of which Felicity spoke and which I took as well. I cannot recommend it highly enough. No exams, no research papers, wonderful, wonderful learning and coordinating Indigenous climate science with Western climate science. I highly recommend it. And now it is my pleasure to welcome Katrina Moser.
Didn't people hear me all right, or would you prefer me to?
It's best to use it.
Is it better? Yeah, okay,
Rather than,
okay, okay.
unless the owl will do.
Okay, okay. I will use the microphone then. Everybody can hear, okay? Yeah. All right. Well, first, thank you so much for inviting me to speak tonight. It's a great privilege. And thank you, Felicity, for the land acknowledgement, and Patsy for the song. And Sheila for your very nice, very kind introduction, and for picking me up so I could actually be here tonight. So really appreciate that. What I want to do tonight is to tell you a little bit about the course. I want to tell you how it was created, why we created it, and a little bit about the impact that it's had on people. And I want to do that by sharing a couple stories, getting you to do a couple of activities, and having some discussion. So, before I jump in, let's see. Well, maybe I'll get you to. So there's just me here tonight, but as this slide shows, the course was created by a whole group of people. So there were 4 of us who did most of the curriculum development, Beth Hundy, myself, Sarah Manchitty, and Serena Mendesville. So that's the 4 of us in that second photo. And Holly Pouchette is an artist, and she did some amazing artwork for the course, and you'll see some of that tonight. And on your right, far right, is Amir Rahman, and he did a lot of help with technical sides to the course, as well as he kept us on track, which we definitely needed help with. And then there was a whole crew of students who brought Holly's artwork to life in videos, and they were absolutely incredible group of students who helped us. So that is the team, and this is I wanted to make a special mention. Dr. Beth Hundy was really inspirational to all of us on the team, and she passed away April 23rd this year. This is the first time I've actually talked about the course since then, and so it's been tough to put the talk together. And I really want to dedicate tonight to Dr. Beth Hundy for keeping me going even now. So the first thing I want to do is to tell you a little bit about myself. And let's see, let's go to the next. This is just telling you what I'm going to talk about, which I've kind of already done, so we'll jump ahead here. This slide basically tells you I do a lot of different things. I have a lot of different roles, like probably everybody in this room. I want to talk a little bit about where I come from. So this is one of the things we do in the course, is we think about our positionality and how our past has given us advantages and sometimes maybe some challenges as well. And so the picture in the middle really is actually the spot where one set of my grandparents came from in Iceland. And you can see it's quite remote. There's really nothing else around that site. And they came here because they could no longer survive. They were incredibly poor, and so hopped on a boat and came to Canada. And my grandparents came in waves, sort of at the end of the 1800s till the early 1900s. And they settled out in Manitoba, most of them near Gimli, Manitoba. And I ended up here in Ontario. My dad grew up on the prairies, but then moved here. So, and they benefited from colonialism. There's no question about it. They were given land almost for free out on the prairies and they farmed that land. And so to start, I want to acknowledge that is the case for my family. I want to acknowledge the historical and ongoing injustices that Indigenous peoples, First Nations, Métis and Inuit endure in Canada, and accept my responsibility to try to contribute toward revealing and correcting miseducation and renewing respectful relationships with Indigenous communities through my teaching, through my research, and community service. And I'm sorry Sarah May couldn't be here with me tonight, Sarah May Chitty. She was unable to come. I will be speaking from my own perspective as a Euro-Western scientist and as a settler. I will at times tell you that I'm actually going to share some of Sarah May's words and teachings. And so you'll know, I'll make sure you know when that is. So what I want to start with is the problem that we're faced with. And in a nutshell, the earth is warming. And I want to just show you this short video clip that's really a trailer for the course, and I think provides a good introduction to the problem that we're trying to solve.
Thrive. Humans are just one species within the interwoven spheres of the earth. Yet in a very brief period of time, we have disrupted Earth's ecosystem, creating imbalances through land clearance and fossil fuel burning, consequently causing greenhouse gases to increase and the Earth's climate to warm.
Climate change is here now. Evidence is overwhelming. The impacts of climate change ripple through social and environmental systems and are felt around the world. This news is overwhelming, but there is hope. The social, economic, and cultural systems causing climate change can be changed. The structures are made up of people like you and me, and they can be shifted to protect ecosystems and all those who live within them for generations to come. What kind of future ancestor do you want to be? Climate change is everybody's business, and we need every voice at the table to find solutions. Join us in deepening your climate change science through Indigenous and Euro-Western perspectives. Connect with others about ways we can collaborate to mitigate the climate crisis and address environmental injustice.
Let's remember our responsibilities to the earth and to each other by connecting for climate change action.
Thank you. So that is kind of in a nutshell what the course is about. And I want to share with you a little bit about some of the science that we have, some of the Euro-Western science that tells us a lot about climate change. So this is a graph that I think is really important to understanding what's happening on Earth right now. And if you look, that x-axis going horizontally starts in 1860 and goes to 2020. And what you're looking at, the black line is showing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere over time. And the blue bars and the red bars are showing what's called the temperature anomaly. So basically, we're looking at the normal, we call it, which is time period between the last 30 years, basically. And we're comparing the temperature for each year to that average or normal. So if it's a blue bar, it's saying it was colder than the average. And if it's a red bar, it's saying it's warmer than the average. So the first thing I want to look at is the black line, the carbon dioxide over time. And what you'll notice is it's increasing, right? And the yellow star, the first yellow star, is the year I was born. And CO2 at that time was about 320 parts per million in the atmosphere. That was the concentration. The second yellow star is the year my son was born. By that time, it was about 308 parts per million. And today it's 430 parts per million. And you might think, well, how big a difference does that make? But if we look back over the last 800,000 years, and we can do that using isotopes, and we can actually extract gas from air bubbles in the ice cores and look at how the composition of the atmosphere has changed over 800,000 years. So if we look at that, and we look at interglacial and glacial periods, we're in an interglacial period right now, so there's not much ice around. The average CO2 level for interglacial periods, non-ice periods, is about 280 parts per million. So we're way outside of what we should expect for this time period. That in itself should be troubling to us. If we look at the temperature, 1862 today, you can see that since about 1980, we're consistently in the red. And that's because the CO2 levels in the atmosphere are higher. CO2 in the atmosphere, what it does is it allows short-wave radiation from the sun to reach the earth. But because of the chemical properties of greenhouse gases, it doesn't let the long-wave radiation out. And so the earth starts to warm up. So that's what we're seeing in this graph. We're seeing CO2 goes up, so do temperatures. And 2024 is the warmest year on record. The last decade is characterized by the 10 hottest years on record. So we're definitely now in a warmer period. And as a climate scientist, so I've been studying climate for 30 years. And I became increasingly frustrated because there is an urgency to take action, and yet haven't done nearly as much as we need to. Oh, actually, I forgot to say one thing too. The other thing, this little picture down here, this is fires in Manitoba. That Felicity you mentioned in your land acknowledgement. And this is one of the many impacts of these rising temperatures. So rising temperatures cause more evaporation, they cause things to be drier, and that's what's fueling these fires that we're seeing across Canada. And I think if you ask most scientists in Canada, we're surprised by how severe these fires have become. This is not what was anticipated. So it's a warning, it's a definite warning to us that we need to take action. Now, this is another slide to illustrate what we've learned from science and also to think about where we're at. And it's a pretty complicated diagram, but its message is actually simple. So the science is on the right. On the left is what we tried to do to show what this plot is showing. And really, this plot, what it's about is what our choices are, what we can do moving forward, and we do have choices. So again, we've got time on the x-axis 1980, so that's when we start to see temperatures rising, to 2100. And what you're looking at on the y-axis is how much CO2 we are going to emit. And the black line is showing what we've actually done. So from 1980 to today, you can see that every year we emit a little more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So it's building in the atmosphere, which is what we saw in the last graph. Then you see all these colorful lines, and they're saying what we could do. They're showing us what our options are for the future. So if you go on the purple line, that's called the sustainability line. And it's basically what scientists or social scientists are doing is saying, we're going to take our best guess at what a sustainable Earth would look like, what people would be doing if they prioritize things like sustainability and keeping people healthy and happy. And that would keep us on the right here are red bars that show how much the temperature will go up based on our choice of emissions. So you'll see on the purple line, we're around somewhere between 1 and 2 degrees of warming, which is good. Scientists argue that if we go above 1.5 degrees C of warming, we get into trouble. Things get problematic for us in terms of losing diversity, increased hazards. Many things, increased sea level rise, are going to become much more difficult if we go above 1.5 degrees C. So we want to stay on the purple line. The other ones are showing other possibilities in terms of what we do. The top one, the brown line, is saying, okay, we're going to just keep burning fossil fuels. That is going to be our way to keep our markets healthy. We're going to think more about human capital instead of human well-being. And we're going to see inequities expand. That's the brown curve. And then we are going to get into temperature rises of at least 3 degrees C or even higher. And that's going to be problematic for us. So on the left, Holly Pichette, what she did was, the green is kind of showing you what the back of a turtle might look like. So thinking about Turtle Island. And then she's drawn these different pathways that we can take in our canoe. And each one of these is representing one of these colorful lines. So again, this idea that we do have choices that we can make, but we need to start making them pretty quickly. And we need, one of the things I think we have to think about is as we gain knowledge, is that we have a responsibility to make one of these choices and then make sure our politicians and other folks in power know what we want. So this is what science has given us. But it didn't give us everything we needed to kind of take the next step to fight climate change. So when we started to work on this course, the four of us would sit down together and we would visit and we would talk. And one of the things Beth and I would be, oh, it's so easy. climate change is happening because we're increasing greenhouse gases, and we're increasing greenhouse gases because we're burning fossil fuels and we're clearing land. There, so we just have to stop burning fossil fuels and we have to stop clearing land. And then one day, Sarah May and Serena said to us, well, you're really not getting at the root problem. And we were like, yes, we are. You know, to stop burning fossil fuels and we need to stop clearing the land. And they said, but why? Why do we keep burning fossil fuels? Why do we keep clearing the land? Why are we doing those things? And Beth and I were like, well, I don't know. So what Sarah May said is, you know, it's in the roots of our problem are in colonialism. And in the last intergovernmental panel on climate change, they actually recognized that. They said colonialism is the root problem, and we need to get at that to solve climate change. So, and Deborah McGregor, Kyle White, and many other well-known Indigenous scholars have been saying this for years. This is where the problem is, and this is what we need to do to deal with. And so I think one of the things, this conversation, when we were sitting around drinking tea together, and this conversation really started to shift Beth and my perspectives on the issues and what we needed to do and thinking about education. So the other important thing I think to keep in mind as I kind of take you through my story tonight is that we probably aren't going to solve climate change if we use the same perspectives that created the problem. So, and this is what I found very frustrating over my career, is that we have all this information, we know what the problem is, we know how to solve it, and we're not doing it. And so I think as long as we stay in this system and keep it the same way, we're not going to get out of it. So we really have to have a systemic change. We need to move in a very different direction. And so I think, Felicity, you mentioned too, the two bills, right? Bill, is it C5 and Bill 5? I mean, this is the type of thing that I think really represents, we're stuck in this system that's not letting us get out of this problem of climate change. So the other little story I wanted to share with you is, so I started teaching climate change at Western, I don't know, maybe 12 years ago. And my initial thinking was, well, if I just share knowledge about climate change with students, that'll help solve the problem. And so for maybe 5 years, that's what I did. I just presented, here's what's causing climate change. Here's all the information you need. That's all you need. Go solve it. And then I had a student come to me and they said, Dr. Moser, I really like your course, but I am so depressed. And I suddenly realized what I was doing is taking my students to a really dark place, because it is dark. Those two graphs I showed, they're not particularly uplifting, but I wasn't telling them what to do with that information. I wasn't helping them take the next step. And so I was about to go on sabbatical, and I decided I had to do something about the course, and I wasn't really sure what I was going to do, but I started talking to people around Western. I talked to people in the philosophy department, I talked to people in the sociology department, I talked to people in education, and then I talked to Beth, and I said, I don't know what to do. She was working at the Center for Teaching and Learning, and she said, I think you need to meet Sarah May Chitties, and so that started this whole course. Down the road that it was eventually going to be on. And what we wanted to do was, number one, we wanted to help folks take action. And number two, we knew we needed to try and help people look at things from a different perspective. And Sarah May and Serena really provided that different way of thinking and different way of looking at things. Let's see, so this is really how we get to here, the Connecting for Climate Change Action course. And what we wanted to do was to braid together Euro-Western science and Indigenous knowledge and perspectives to empower and inspire students to take action on climate change. And our journey started, and it was tough for me at the beginning. We got a grant and we had like a year to get a whole bunch of stuff done. And we very quickly realized this is not an easy undertaking. And Beth and I, Sarah May and Serena, we needed to teach each other a lot. And we needed to build relationships. We needed to have trust amongst us to be able to put this course together. So we did crazy things like drinking tea and talking about the course. We went on writing retreats, and this is in Tobermory, and the three of us went and tried to work on the course. But it was stressful for me because universities have tight timelines, and they don't provide time for drinking tea and talking and visiting and getting to know each other. But we couldn't have done the course if we hadn't done those things. And I think that's a good example of kind of some of the pressures in our society as it is that don't allow all the time for us to think things through and find better pathways. These are gonna be, I might just, let's see. I'm gonna jump around here for a minute because I kind of wanted to change the order. So the course is really based on a number of philosophies or foundations, I guess you could call it, that form a basis for our course. And the first one is gratitude and reciprocity. And this pedagogy recognizes knowledge as a gift. And this, the next little bit I'm gonna actually read, and is coming from Sarah May. So, as I said, the pedagogy recognizes knowledges as a gift, and that Indigenous knowledges come from the land, which sustains us. This is where the course begins, rooting learners in the places they live, their own positionality and self-location, and reminding them of treaty responsibilities following Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee teachings, that when we take care of the land will take care of us. So this is the concept of reciprocity, and it's encoded in treaties that we should all be familiar with. And in particular, the Dish with One Spoon Wampum, which provides a reciprocity framework. This teaches us that we all eat from the same dish, the land, and that we have a responsibility to keep that dish clean and not take more than we need, so that future generations also have what they need to thrive. So I think that's one of the places we're really struggling as a society. The other reciprocity piece in Anishinaabe pedagogy is that when we receive knowledge, we have a responsibility to use it to help our communities. That each of us carry gifts and responsibilities in relationship to our communities, and the course is designed to help students recognize and identify these roles and responsibilities in a reconciliation and climate change context. So we also really wanted to reflect these ideas in our team. And this is why we made space and time for us to come together, to be creative, and to support each other in bringing our gifts forward to contribute to making the course a success. And as I said, this was tough. This was really hard, coming from an academic background and a pretty competitive background. So the other thing that was really important to us was, again, and these are Sarah May's words, our team wanted to focus on relationships, and we started with our relationships to treaties that show us how to work together in a good way. Because we're located in southwestern Ontario and the Great Lakes region, we utilize the 2-row and dish with 1 spoon wampum agreements as guiding principles for our team to inform course learning outcomes. And we wanted students to be able to recognize the distinct and sovereign ways of knowing and being that diverse Indigenous peoples carry, and be able to navigate the tensions and synergies that emerge, engaging both Indigenous and Euro-Western ways of knowing and being. And there definitely were, particularly with me, there were tensions that arose as I tried to learn from Sarah May and Serena. And I have to say, I'm sure I learned more than anybody else on the team. And I am very, very grateful to everyone who shared so much knowledge with me. Really, this is what formed the basis of our relationship and the creation of the course. So I'm going to go back here for 1 minute to this slide. And this is really to get us thinking about connections. And this is one of the places where there's a real disconnect from how Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee look at the world and how Euro-Western scientists look at the world. So on the left is a picture showing humans at the top of the hierarchy. And even now, scientists constantly frame things in a way where humans are kind of at the top of the evolutionary pyramid. That's completely different if you're Anishinaabe or Haudenosaunee, completely different. As a human, you're part of this. And to me, that makes so much more sense, right? We aren't at the top. And the ecosystems, I hate this word that is used all the time in the fields I'm in, ecosystem services. That everything that happens in ecosystems is there for humans. No, no, no. We're all connected. And that's a real shift in thinking. When we go from Euro-Western thinking to Indigenous framework. And on the, sorry, I'm really bad with left and right. On the right is an image that Holly drew for us that was trying to show that in science, we talk about the atmosphere, the biosphere, the lithosphere, the cryosphere, the hydrosphere. And we study them independently, but they're all connected. It's this like amazing web of connections. And when you talk about climate change, you have to think about those connections. So that became really important to our course and to thinking about our course is connections. And now I'm going to jump in here. So I've talked now for quite a few minutes, and one of the things we think is really important is to bring many perspectives to the table and to also get people to reflect and think about what they're hearing and learning. So you're in tables, and I just want you to take a minute to think about how do you view your connection to the land? This is an image, I love canoeing, and this is up in Georgia Bay. And early morning, and one of my kind of favorite images. Just think about what's your connection like to the land? How would you describe it? And talk to your neighbors. So I'm going to give you like 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'll just see if anybody wants to share with us what you've discussed. And if you don't know your neighbors, make sure you introduce yourself first.
Okay. Yes.
All right. All right. Okay, I'm gonna bring you back. It's great that there's so much discussion. So, would anyone like to share, what their connection to the land looks like? Yes. Sure, I'll give you the.
I was just gonna say, first of all, I did take your course as well, and I really enjoyed it. One connection, we have a cottage near the primary provincial park, and we're very fortunate to see so many creatures, turtles, deer, swans nesting, like wild swans nesting, not strapped swans. And, but one special thing to me is, gratitude and reciprocity. We took our grandson for a walk in the meadow with the pond, and we were looking at all the creatures and the plants and feeling gratitude. And then there was a piece of plastic there which we picked up, and so I was able to tell him the concept of gratitude and reciprocity. So I was happy to see it there.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's really wonderful. And I think cottages were in Canada, there's quite a few people have cottages, and it is a wonderful place to connect to the land. Anybody else want to share? Yes, wonderful. Thanks, Alex.
Even here in Stratford. There is the manicure that passed around, going on at night, going towards the festival, but there's also the TJ. And you just walk through there and nothing has been done to it except chip bark paths, so that you can connect and you can do it. A place like that, actually in a city. The sounds.
Yeah.
As well.
Absolutely. I'm glad you made that point, because one of my favorite places in the whole world now is the little section that goes along the Thames River through London, and unbelievable what you see in there. I go down there almost every morning, and it's right in the middle of the city, but it is a really special place. So I'm really glad you made that point. Yeah. I'm gonna, because I love hearing what people have to say. Maybe we have time for one more. Is there? Yes, over here.
Well, I was just gonna, piggyback on these two, like being in nature, and I like canoeing, and I like being in the forest, and they've got so much information now about how healing it is, and for stress. It's like kids and adults, if we were outside, we were like, obviously in the trees and and that's, but it's very, we've forgotten how important it is. And we have to kind of make a point of doing it as opposed to just kind of living in a rural situation.
Yeah.
But like when I was in TJ Dolan the other day, it was in May, I saw like 8 turtles. And one was like this big. I don't know if it was coming out to lay eggs. It was very nice for it, but it was fantastic.
Yeah, and you're right, it is very healing, it's very, very healing. Yeah. So, wonderful point, thank you. I'm gonna take you to this. All right, thanks, everybody, and thank you for sharing with each other and with me. And what I'm gonna do, I will. Maybe it doesn't want to go. I'm gonna leave you with something here. I'll get you to pass them around. You can take this home or not if you want, but there is a thing about the course on the back, and there's another question that you can ponder in your spare time, which is, this is a beautiful piece of artwork by Christy Belcourt, called Wisdom of the Universe, and that's what's on this card that I'm passing around. And you can think about, what would it look like? Place the rights of Mother Earth above the rights to Mother Earth. So I'll leave you that one, to take home with you. So we kind of got this foundation, we built this foundation for the course, and then we thought, well, how do we put this into action? And so we used a couple of different approaches, and one is something called two-eyed seeing. And what I want to do, is I promised to tell you a story. I'm going to read a little bit from Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Probably some of you have read this book. My all-time favorite. You can tell I read it a lot. I have all the sticky notes in it. And this is a story. It's in the book. It's called Asters and Goldenrod. And I'm not going to read the whole chapter, but I want to read a little bit. And I think it beautifully illustrates what two-eyed seeing is. So just to give you the background, Robin Wall Kimmerer goes off to school, and she wants to take botany, and they interview her and they say, you know, what are you interested in learning? And she says, I want to know, why are asters and goldenrods so beautiful together? And the botanist professor says, well, that's not a question you answer with science. You have a lot to learn, type thing. And so she goes through her undergraduate, and then she ends up at graduate school. So I'm going to pick up that story, as she's at graduate school, and she's working as a caretaker with her partner, and she's looking at a bulletin board, and she sees this name, Louis View Elm. And this is where her story is going to start tonight. My heart began to pound, and I knew my world was about to change, for I'd known the name Louis View all my life, and here his face was looking at me from a news clipping. He was our Potawatomi grandfather, who had walked all the way from the Wisconsin forest to the Kansas prairie with my grandma Shumway. He was a leader, one who took care of the people in their hardship. That garage door was left ajar, that light was left burning so that I would see this clipping on the bulletin board. It was the beginning of a long, slow journey back to my people, called out to me by the tree that stood above their bones. To walk the science path, I had stepped up the path of Indigenous knowledge. But the world has a way of guiding your steps. Seemingly out of the blue came an invitation to a small gathering of Native elders to talk about traditional knowledge of plants. One I will never forget. A Navajo woman without a day of university botany training in her life spoke for hours, and I hung on every word. One by one, name by name, she told of the plants in her valley, where each one lived, when it bloomed, who it liked to live near, and all its relationships, who ate it, who lined their nests with its fibers, what kind of medicine it offered. She also shared the stories held by those plants, their origin myths, how they got their names, and what they had to tell us. She spoke of beauty. Her words were like smelling salts, waking me to what I had known back when I was picking strawberries. I realized how shallow my understanding was. Her knowledge was so much deeper, wider, and engaged all the human ways of understanding. She could have explained asters and goldenrod. To a new PhD, this was humbling. It was the beginning of my reclaiming that other way of knowing that I had helplessly let science supplant. I felt like a malnourished refugee invited to a feast, the dishes scented with the herbs of home. I circled right back to where I had begun, to the question of beauty, back to the question that science does not ask, not because they aren't important, but because science as a way of knowing is too narrow for the task. Had my advisor been a better scholar, he would have celebrated my question, not dismissed it. He offered me only the cliche that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and since science separates the observer and the observed, By definition, beauty could not be a valid scientific question. I should have been told that my questions were bigger than science could touch. He was right about the beauty being in the eye of the beholder, especially when it comes to purple and yellow. Color perception in humans relies on banks of specialized receptor cells, the rods and cones in the retina. The job of the cone cells is to absorb light of different wavelengths and pass it on to the brain's visual cortex where it can be interpreted. The visible light spectrum, the rainbow of colors, is broad, so the most effective means of discerning color is not one generalized jack of all trades, cone cell, but rather an array of specialists, each perfectly tuned to observe certain wavelengths. The human eye has three kinds. One type excels at detecting red and associated wavelengths. One is tuned to blue and the other to yellow and purple. The human eye is superbly equipped to detect these colors and send a signal pulsing to the brain. This doesn't explain why I perceive them as beautiful, but it does explain why that combination gets my undivided attention. I asked my artist buddies about the power of purple and gold, and they sent me right to the color wheel. These two are complementary colors, as different in nature as could be. In composing a palette, putting them together makes each more vivid. Just a touch of one will bring out the other. Purple and yellow are a reciprocal pair. Our eyes are so sensitive to these wavelengths, the cones can get oversaturated and the stimulus pours over into other cells. A printmaker I know showed me that if you stare for a long time at a block of yellow and then shift your gaze to a white sheet of paper, you will see it for a moment as violet. This phenomenon, the colored after image, occurs because there is energetic reciprocity between purple and yellow pigments, which goldenrod and asters knew well before we did. If my advisor was correct, the visual effect that so delights a human like me may be irrelevant to the flowers. The real beholder whose eye they hope to catch is the bee, bent on pollination. Bees perceive many flowers differently than humans do, due to their perception of additional spectra such as ultraviolet radiation. As it turns out, goldenrod and asters appear very similarly to bee eyes as they do to human eyes. We both think they're beautiful. Their striking contrast when they grow together makes them the most attractive target in the whole meadow. So why are they beautiful together? It's a phenomenon simultaneously material and spiritual, for which we need all wavelengths, for which we need depth perception. When I stare too long at the world with science eyes, I see an after image of traditional knowledge. Might science and traditional knowledge be purple and yellow to one another? Might they be goldenrod and asters? We see the world more fully when we use both. The question of goldenrod and asters was, of course, just emblematic of what I really wanted to know. It was an architecture of relationships, of connections that I yearned to understand. I wanted to see the shimmering threads that hold it all together. And I wanted to know why we love the world, why the most ordinary scrap of meadow can rock us back on our heels in awe. When botanists go walking the forests and fields looking for plants, we say they are going on a foray. When writers do the same, we should call it a metaphor, and the land is rich in both. We need them both, scientists and poets. Jeffrey Burton Russell writes that as the sign of a deeper truth, metaphor was close to sacrament, because the vastness and richness of reality cannot be expressed by the overt sense of statement alone. Native scholar Greg Petcha has written that in indigenous ways of knowing, we understand a thing only when we understand it with all four aspects of our being: mind, body, emotion, and spirit. I came to understand quite sharply when I began my training as a scientist that science privileges only one, maybe two, of those ways of knowing: mind and body. As a young person wanting to know everything about plants, I did not question this. But it is a whole human being who finds the beautiful path. There was a time when I teetered precariously with an awkward foot in each of two worlds, the scientific and the indigenous. But then I learned to fly, or at least try. It It was the bees that showed me how to move between different flowers, to drink the nectar and gather pollen from both. It is this dance of cross-pollination that can produce a new species of knowledge, a new way of being in the world. After all, there are two worlds. There's just one good green earth. That September pairing of purple and gold is lived reciprocity. Its wisdom is that the beauty of one is illuminated by the radiance of the other. Science and art, matter and spirit, indigenous knowledge and Western science. Can they be goldenrod and asters for each other? When I am in their presence, their beauty asks me for reciprocity, to be the complementary color, to make something beautiful in response. So I love that chapter. I think it's my favorite in the book. But it really illustrates this idea of two-eyed seeing, of taking two perspectives and using them together to get a greater understanding. So we tried our best to make this a really important part of the course. And along with two-eyed seeing is an idea of ethical space. And this is how what we need to communicate when we're coming from different perspectives. So Willie Irvine, he talks about ethical space and he describes it with an image of two people sitting on a bench. And one is dressed in military clothes and he's from an army that's just taking over this country. And the other person on the bench is someone, just a civilian, who has suffered from this war that's happened in the country. And they're sitting on the bench and they're trying to talk about what's happened and they're trying to communicate. And it's that space in between that becomes really important. And I love this quote: the idea of ethical space produced by contrasting perspectives of the world entertains the notion of a meeting place or initial thinking zone between entities or cultures. The space offers a venue to step out of our allegiances, to detach from the cages of our mental worlds and assume a position where human-to-human dialogue can occur. So this was the other thing we wanted to do in our course, was to create spaces where people could share different perspectives. And the last thing that we thought was super important and which really has resonated with our students is this idea of 7 generations, where we kind of thinking about the course and thinking about climate change. Climate change is a problem that started at least 7 generations ago. And now we're seeing the effects of that. And we want to learn from what's happened 7 generations back. And we want to take actions that will allow for 7 generations ahead to thrive. So this is very different than our political system, right? Where, if we're lucky, people are thinking 4 years down the road. So this gives, especially with a problem like climate change, a much better perspective. So our approach was multiple directions, multiple ways. We wanted to use a holistic indigenous pedagogy, and we wanted to root that in treaties and reciprocity. We wanted to offer students opportunities to blend scientific data and evidence from these different perspectives. And really, we wanted to engage in cross-cultural dialogue. So we've decided to focus on connections, and the connections we decided to focus on were relationships with land, relationships with self, relationships with each other, and relationships with systems. And we developed a series of activities to help students work on that. And you played around a little bit with one, if I have time, and I'm worried I'm running out of time, but we can try another one. The other thing we wanted to do, so we have activities, we have this kind of overall perspective, bring to IC ethical space. We want people to communicate with each other, talk to each other. We also really took a lot from climate scientist and activist Catherine Hayhoe. And she makes the point in many of her presentations and in her writings that if we want to tackle climate change, we have to talk about it. And we need to talk about it all over the place. And we need to find shared values that let us come together to tackle this big problem. And so that's the other thing we do in the course is we really encourage students to talk. Let's see here. So, a couple of activities that we do. A big piece of the course's success is that we provide space for students to critically reflect on the relationships that I outlined. And to think about power and place, use self-location, think about their positionality, think about their experiences and their identities, where they've lived, their languages. And this really informs how they tackle a problem like climate change. And we also think a lot about connections to the land, which we've already done a little bit here. But this is an activity where students go out somewhere close to home and sit in nature. They have to leave their phones behind and they have to use all of their senses and just sit for 15 minutes and observe what's going on. And then they reflect and share with the class on what they've learned. And you can see the little blue dots are showing where people have reported from. Most of them come from Southwestern Ontario. Like if you zoom in on Southwestern Ontario, there's a lot. But they're very moving, what people write. Some people have said that's paintings, some people have written poems, some people have expressed really profound thoughts from this exercise. And students always surprise me because they say, wow, I've never done that. I've never left my phone for a whole all of 15 minutes. So, and it's really, I think that is something that we've lost in our society is this connection to the land. And another great example, I take students in the field with me to do field work. And I work often in remote areas. So I had students up in the Uinta Mountains, which is in Utah. And the night skies are incredible. And most of them had never seen the Milky Way, which I was just shocked by, right? And so I think that connection is so, so important. Let's see, I'm almost, there we go. How much time do I have? Because I have an activity, but I know if I need to stop, you tell me.
Stop, great,
Okay,
and then we'll do an activity.
okay, perfect. And then I have about 3 slides, if it's okay, after the activity to wrap up. Is that all right?
That's just fine.
Okay. So take a little break, and I'm gonna hand out cards while you're taking a break.
If everyone
So Katrina, thank you very much and for you. Some people may have to leave. I just thought we thank you for coming today and giving you a little gift of our appreciation for what you've imparted on us. You know, we're in a rat race and unfortunately we're the rats. And the definition of a fool is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, which never happens, of course. So thanks for showing your perspective on how we may be able to change that. And maybe able to go out and have that conversation that's been so difficult for us. And wishing you well in your future endeavors, okay?
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
We wanted to do that, I think, because I know 1 or 2 people have to leave. I hope it will return at break because I think Katrina is a wonderful teacher. And she has imparted so many of the concepts of the course practically deeply in taking it. We will have a break. There are refreshments left there from Rebel. And on the table, we will find these little cards. Some of you have already filled them out. If you would, we will talk more at the end about where we may be going from the climate conversations, because this is the last. And many people have come to me and said, is it over? What do we do next? So we are talking about options that may grow out of the climate conversation. But we would also like to know what you want to learn about in climate. So please do take the time to fill this out, and if you're not on the Climate Momentum mailing list, that gives you an opportunity to indicate that you would like to know more about what we do next. So, enjoy your break.
Would you like to leave these?
There is a box